Princess Arathia of the Zyrethi Star Empire walked through the long glass corridor of the palace, her steps quiet and measured. Anyone watching her would have seen a tall alien woman with soft silver skin and faint bioluminescent markings that glowed weakly across her arms and cheeks. To most Zyrethi, these markings were a symbol of strength, beauty, and emotional brightness. But Arathia had lived her whole life hearing the same whispered comment over and over again. Her light is too dim. Zyrethi children with bright markings grew up surrounded by admiration. Their glow reacted to their feelings. Joy made them shine like stars. Courage made them blaze like fire. But Arathia's markings had never reacted strongly to anything. They flickered softly, like a candle in a storm, and often stayed completely still. Because of this, the people around her believed she lacked emotional richness. Some even thought she was born defective. She never argued. She never explained. She simply lived with it, wearing a calm expression that hid the steady ache in her chest. Today, however, she had no time to think about her own insecurities. A human delegation was arriving at the palace, one of the first official diplomatic contacts between their two species. Arathia had been ordered to receive them personally because her father, the emperor, believed her quiet nature made her safe and predictable. She rarely expressed strong emotion, which meant she rarely caused political trouble. She wondered if he had ever realized that her silence came from fear, not composure. As she walked, two palace attendants followed her at a respectful distance. They carried tablets filled with briefing notes about humanity, its history, customs, and strange habit of smiling during conversations. Arathia knew the details already. She had read everything twice. She had watched recordings of humans speaking at diplomatic summits. They were expressive, emotional, unpredictable. Their faces shifted constantly. Eyebrows rising, eyes widening, mouths curving. Humans were everything she was told she could never be. The doors of the reception hall opened with a soft chime. Inside, a group of Zyrethi officials already waited, standing stiff and formal. They bowed as she entered, though their eyes flicked briefly to her dim markings. She pretended not to notice. "Your Highness," said Minister Talinar, stepping forward. "The Terran transport has landed. They will arrive in 5 minutes. We advise minimal contact and a strictly formal tone." Arathia nodded. "Of course. Their emotional displays may seem overwhelming," he added with a small frown. "If you find it uncomfortable, we can step between you and the delegation." "I will manage," she replied gently. He bowed again, though Arathia sensed he doubted her. Most people doubted her. She had grown used to it. The doors on the far side opened, and the human delegation entered. Arathia straightened, forcing her posture to stay calm and graceful. There were 6 humans, wearing navy uniforms with white trim. They looked small compared to the tall Zyrethi officials, but their eyes were bright, and their body language relaxed. Arathia observed them closely, trying to read their expressions. Humans relied heavily on facial cues, and she had practiced studying their faces, though she still found it difficult. One human stepped forward. He looked young, perhaps early 30s by human standards, with warm brown skin, short black hair, and eyes that held a kind of open curiosity she had never seen before. His name, according to the briefing notes, was Marcus Hale, a xenocultural specialist. He bowed slightly, a gesture adapted for Zyrethi customs. "Princess Arathia," he said, his voice steady and warm. "It's an honor to meet you." Arathia placed her hand over her chest, the Zyrethi sign of greeting. "Welcome to the Zyrethi Imperial Palace. We are pleased to receive you." Her voice sounded calm, but inside, she felt the familiar pressure of anxiety. She wondered if her markings were flickering too dimly. Humans probably would not notice, but her own people always did. Marcus smiled, not the polite diplomatic smile she expected, but a gentle one, like he truly meant it. His eyes studied her face, not with discomfort or judgment, but with interest. Arathia felt her stomach tighten with confusion. Our briefing, said Zyrethi, value clarity in introductions, Marcus said. So, let me say openly, we are grateful to be here. I'm looking forward to learning from you. Arathia blinked, unsure how to respond to such direct sincerity. Humans were so different. They did not hide emotion. They embraced it. You may ask questions at any time, she said softly. I will do my best to answer. I appreciate that, Marcus replied. If it's acceptable, I'd like to begin by saying, your bioluminescent patterns are remarkable. I've read about them in studies, but seeing them in person is far more fascinating. Arathia froze. She had expected confusion, maybe even discomfort. She had not expected praise. They are not considered remarkable, she said carefully, her voice almost too quiet. Not among my people. Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying the faint glow along her cheekbones. Then your people have very high standards, he said with a soft chuckle. They look lovely to me. Arathia felt her heart stumble. Lovely? No one had ever used such a word for her, not even her own family. Her markings flickered in a brief, bright pulse so quick she thought she had imagined it. She lifted her hand slightly and touched her cheek, surprised by the faint warmth there. The Zyrethi officials shifted uncomfortably behind her. They didn't like hearing a human call her lovely. They didn't like seeing her markings respond. Arathia kept her face neutral, though her thoughts swirled. Thank you, she said finally, though the words felt unfamiliar. You are kind. Not kindness, Marcus said, shrugging. Just honesty. Arathia didn't know how to answer. Honesty had never been gentle in her life. Honesty had always been a reminder of what she lacked. But, coming from this human, the word felt different. The delegation followed her as she led them through the palace corridors, explaining architecture and history. Marcus listened closely, occasionally asking questions that showed he genuinely cared about her answers. Every time he spoke, she felt her tension ease, just a little. And every time he smiled, she felt something warm flicker beneath her skin. Something she didn't recognize. Something she wasn't sure she deserved. By the time they reached the grand observatory, Arathia realized with quiet shock that she wasn't anxious anymore. For the first time in her life, someone had looked at her without disappointment, without judgment, without pity. A human had called her lovely, and that single word echoed through her mind like a small, bright spark, lighting a corner of her heart she had long believed would stay dark forever. Princess Arathia stood inside the grand observatory, the domed ceiling above her glowing with soft starlight. The glass panels showed the endless stretch of deep space, the distant suns shining like scattered jewels. She had always loved this place. It was quiet, open, and empty enough that she could breathe without feeling judged. The human delegation stepped inside behind her. Most of them looked around, with wide eyes, whispering to each other, amazed at the size of the hall. Arathia watched them silently, wondering what they saw, wondering if she looked strange to them, or if they had already forgotten the moment when Marcus had called her lovely. She tried not to think about that word too much, but it kept returning to her mind, glowing brighter than her markings ever had. Marcus Hale approached the central platform with slow steps, his gaze drifting across the star map that surrounded the room. He seemed fascinated, like a child seeing something beautiful for the first time. This is incredible, he murmured, turning slowly. Like standing inside the galaxy itself. Arathia felt a small smile trying to form, though she kept it hidden. It is designed to show every star system known to us. Each one is updated in real time through our observatories. Marcus nodded, stepping closer to her without hesitation. She stiffened a little, unused to anyone standing so near. Zyrethi normally kept more distance in formal settings. But humans, she had learned, had different ideas of personal space. "If you don't mind," he said gently, "I'd like to ask a question." "You may," she replied, though her voice was very soft. Marcus pointed toward the faint glow on her arms. "Your markings, they changed earlier. Just a bit. Do they shift? Based on emotion?" Arathia felt heat touch her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the strange awareness that he had noticed something even her own attendants often ignored. "Yes," she answered slowly. "They react to emotional intensity. Or rather, they should." Marcus looked at her with patient curiosity, not pushing her to explain. But something in his warm expression made the truth slip out before she could stop it. "Mine have never been bright," she whispered. "People say it means I feel less. That I am less." Marcus's eyebrows raised slightly. "Do you believe that?" Arathia hesitated. She wanted to say no. She wanted to say she had never cared about their opinions. But a lifetime of quiet wounds pressed on her chest. So, she told the truth. "I do not know," she said. "But it is difficult not to believe something when everyone repeats it." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He looked around the observatory, then back at her, as if searching for the right words. Then he said softly, "Brightness doesn't define a person's worth. The markings don't decide who you are. You do." Arathia stared at him. He spoke as though the idea was simple, obvious. But to her, it was like hearing a new language. "You speak as if it is easy to choose who you are," she said. "It's not," Marcus replied with a small laugh. His voice held no judgment, no pity. Just understanding. And it made her chest feel lighter, even if she didn't fully understand why. Before she could respond, one of the human officers called Marcus over to check some data on their tablet. He excused himself, with a gentle nod, and walked away. Arathia watched him go, unsure why she felt a strange disappointment at his absence. Her markings flickered faintly again. She quickly folded her hands behind her back, hoping no one noticed. For the next half hour, Arathia guided the humans through the observatory, explaining the star systems and the Empire's exploration history. The humans listened respectfully, occasionally asking questions, but Marcus always asked questions that surprised her: questions about culture, art, traditions, and her personal thoughts. Most people never asked her personal questions. They assumed she had nothing interesting to say. But Marcus listened to every word she spoke. Near the end of the tour, a soft chime echoed through the hall, signaling the palace's transition cycle. Lights adjusted, the temperature shifted by a few degrees, and the floor panels brightened. Some of the human delegates looked startled. "It's only the cycle change," Arathia explained. "Our palace adjusts its interior environment every 6 hours." Marcus smiled. "Your technology is impressive. Though I admit, it's a little surprising." Arathia tilted her head. "You did not read about it in the briefing notes?" "We did," he said. "But reading about something isn't the same as experiencing it." She thought about that. Humans seem to value experience more than information. Maybe that was why Marcus looked at everything with such open curiosity. As they prepared to leave the observatory, Marcus slowed his steps until he walked beside her again. He kept his voice low, so the others wouldn't hear. "I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable earlier," he said. "About your markings." "No," Arathia said quickly. Almost too quickly. She cleared her throat. "You did not. You seemed surprised," he said lightly. "I was," she admitted. "People do not normally call them lovely." Marcus gave a small shrug. "Beauty isn't limited by what others expect. Sometimes something is beautiful simply because it exists." Arathia blinked at him, startled by how casually he said it, as if it were the most natural truth in the galaxy. Her markings flickered once more, just a soft pulse, like a heartbeat. Marcus noticed. She saw his eyes widen slightly in wonder, not judgment. "That's amazing," he whispered. Do they glow more when you feel something strongly? I am not sure, she said honestly. I have never seen them react like this before. Marcus smiled, and the quiet warmth in his eyes made her markings pulse again. Brighter this time. Arathea quickly looked away, embarrassed by her own reaction. Perhaps the palace lights are affecting them. Marcus didn't argue, but she sensed he didn't believe her excuse. They exited the observatory and made their way down another long corridor. The Zyrethi officials maintained their careful distance, whispering quietly among themselves. Arathea caught fragments of their voices. Her markings. Unusual behavior. Humans affect her too strongly. This could complicate diplomacy. She ignored them, but their words pricked at her heart. She had always been a quiet shadow in the palace, unnoticed and unimportant. The sudden attention felt overwhelming. Marcus noticed her expression tighten slightly. He lowered his voice again. Are you all right? I am fine, she said. You don't look fine. His honesty made her pause. No one in the palace ever told her she didn't look fine. They usually expected her to remain silent and calm. She breathed out slowly. It is nothing. Marcus gave her a searching look, then said softly, If you ever want to talk, I'll listen. The offer startled her more than anything he had said so far. Not because it was grand, but because it was simple and real. Before she could answer, the delegation reached the central hall. A formal dinner would follow later. For now, they were dismissed to their guest suites. Marcus stepped back, giving her a respectful nod. Thank you for the tour, Princess. I enjoyed every moment. Arathea opened her mouth to answer, but no words came out. She could only watch as he walked away with the others. Her markings, for the first time in many years, glowed with a soft but steady light. Inside her chest, something warm and unfamiliar began to take shape, something she wasn't ready to name yet. But she knew one thing for certain. The human had looked at her as if she mattered, and for the first time in her life, she wanted to believe it. The palace was calm that evening, but Princess Arathea felt a strange tension in the air, like the quiet before a storm. After guiding the human delegation to their guest suites, she returned to her private chambers, hoping a moment alone would help her settle her thoughts. Yet the moment the doors closed behind her, she felt the weight of the entire day settle on her shoulders. She sat by the window, where the glowing city lights of the capital shone like tiny floating stars. Normally, the sight brought her comfort. Tonight, it only reminded her of how different everything had become in a matter of hours. Marcus's words still echoed in her mind. You do not have less worth. Your markings are lovely. I'll listen. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She didn't know how to make sense of the feeling, spreading slowly through her chest, like warmth after a long, cold season. She touched the faint glow on her arm, wondering why her markings reacted so strongly around him. It frightened her a little, but it also gave her a quiet hope she didn't understand yet. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Princess Arathea, came the voice of her attendant through the intercom. The Emperor requests your presence in the strategy chamber. Arathea stood immediately. Her father rarely summoned her directly. Something must be wrong. She followed the attendant through a series of corridors until they reached a secured wing of the palace. Guards stood at attention, tense and alert. As she entered the strategy chamber, she found the Emperor, several ministers, and high-ranking generals gathered around a holographic display. Her father turned toward her. Arathea, the situation has changed. What situation? She asked quietly. A rebel faction has made a move, he replied. We believe they intend to destabilize the palace. They see today's diplomatic event as an opportunity. Arathea's breath caught. Will they attack the humans? Possibly, the Emperor said, but more likely, they may target someone within the palace. She understood the unspoken implication. Rebels often sought symbolic hostages. She was considered weak unimportant, and easy to capture. A perfect target. Arathea lowered her eyes. I will cooperate with whatever measures you need. Before anyone could respond, an alarm blared through the chamber. The lights shifted to red, and the holographic table flashed warnings. Security breach, a guard shouted. Multiple unauthorized units inside the palace. Eastern sector compromised. The Emperor stiffened. Activate defense protocols. Evacuate foreign diplomats at once. Arathea felt her heart tighten. Marcus and the other humans were in the eastern guest wing. A wave of urgency rushed through her. Before she even realized it, her legs were moving. She turned and ran out of the chamber. Arathea, her father called. Stop. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Something deep inside her pushed her forward. Fear. Responsibility. Something else she didn't want to name. The hallways echoed with distant shouts as she ran across polished floors, her markings glowing faintly with adrenaline. She reached the corridor leading to the guest suites, only to find a group of rebels already approaching, carrying stun weapons and wearing dark cloaks. They stopped when they saw her. There she is, one whispered. The dim-marked princess. Arathea froze, her breath trembling. She had always avoided confrontation, but there was no time to think. She turned to run the other way. A door opened beside her, and Marcus stepped out. The door slid shut just as the rebels reached the intersection. Arathea leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Marcus looked at her, concern written clearly on his face. Princess, are you hurt? He asked. No. She managed. But the rebels. They are here. You must evacuate. Marcus shook his head firmly. We're not leaving you behind. You must, she insisted. They targeted the palace because of me. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then we stay with you. She stared at him, startled by the certainty in his tone. This is not your fight. It became our fight the moment they entered your home, Marcus said. And it became my fight when you ran toward danger instead of away from it. Her markings flickered again, even in the chaos. Commander Ruiz, the leader of the human security team, moved to the window and scanned the exterior. If we stay here, they'll trap us, she said. We need to move to a safer position. Arathea took a steady breath. There is a maintenance passage 2 corridors from here. It connects to a secure lift that leads to the central command floor. Then that's where we go, Marcus said. They opened the door quietly and stepped into the hallway. The rebels had moved on, but the air still felt heavy with danger. Arathea led the group, her steps light and quick. Marcus stayed close beside her, eyes constantly watching their surroundings. As they moved, he asked quietly, Why did you run toward us? You could have stayed safe. Arathea didn't look at him. I did not think. I only... Marcus smiled softly. Then I'm glad you felt it. We're safer together. Her markings pulsed at his words stronger than ever. She had no explanation for it. They turned a corner, and Arathea stopped suddenly. A collapsing support beam blocked the path. Sparks flickered from damaged wires overhead. We cannot go through, she whispered. Marcus examined the blockage. Ruiz tapped her wrist tablet. Human reinforcements are 5 minutes out. We need another route. Arathea scanned the corridor. There is an old archive hall through that door, she said, pointing to a heavy entrance nearby. It connects to the maintenance passage from the other side. Perfect, Marcus said. They slipped inside. The archive hall was dark and filled with rows of sealed shelves. The quiet made Arathea uneasy, but she kept moving. As they walked, Marcus leaned closer. You handled the situation well. I ran blindly, she whispered. That is not strength. Marcus shook his head. Sometimes, courage doesn't look like confidence. Sometimes, it looks like caring enough to act. She almost tripped. No one had ever described her actions as courage. Before she could respond, a noise echoed behind them, the soft click of a door opening. The rebels had followed. Ruiz signaled the humans to spread out. "Go, princess. We'll hold them back." "No," Arathia said, surprising even herself. "We stay together." "No," Marcus nodded. "Agreed. We move as one group." Quote, they rushed toward the far exit of the archive. The faint glow of the maintenance passage appeared ahead like a promise of safety. Just before reaching it, a stray stun blast hit the wall near Arathia. She stumbled, and Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her upright. "Careful," he whispered. "I am fine," she said, breathless. "Good," he replied, "because I'd hate to carry you while running." Despite everything, a small laugh escaped her, soft, shaky, but real. Her markings glowed warmly. They reached the maintenance passage at last. Ruiz sealed the door behind them, locking out the rebels for now. Arathia leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. Marcus stood beside her, breathing hard but smiling with relief. "You did well," he said softly. She looked up at him, and for the first time in her life, she believed the praise. Her markings glowed brighter than ever, lighting the dim passage with a soft, gentle radiance. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew one thing with complete certainty. She no longer felt unlovable, not while a human stood beside her and saw her clearly. The maintenance passage was narrow and dim, lit only by a few flickering wall panels. Princess Arathia stood still for a moment, trying to calm her racing heart. The humans gathered around her, checking their equipment and catching their breath. The danger was not over, but at least they had a moment to think. Marcus stayed close to her side, not touching her, but always near enough that she felt safer. Arathia tried not to focus on the strange comfort he brought, yet her markings glowed in a soft rhythm every time he looked her way. Commander Ruiz opened a holographic map on her wrist tablet. "We need to reach the central command floor. Once we link with the Emperor's Guard, we can secure the princess and get full control of the palace." Arathia nodded. "The lift is at the end of this passage. It bypasses the main halls." Marcus glanced back toward the sealed door. "Rebels won't take long to cut through. We should move." They walked together, their footsteps echoing softly. The passage twisted left, then right, then opened into a larger mechanical chamber, filled with humming engines and power lines. The humans looked around with wary eyes. Ruiz pointed upward. "Two exits. Which one leads to the lift?" Arathia moved ahead, her steps light. "This one." Marcus followed her closely. "I used to explore these passages as a child," she admitted quietly. "When I wanted to be alone." Marcus gave her a warm look. "I'm glad that old knowledge can help us now." Her markings flickered again, but she didn't hide them this time. She let them glow. As they moved deeper, the ground shook suddenly. A loud blast echoed through the metal walls. "That was close," Ruiz muttered. "They're breaking through the archive hall. We must hurry," Arathia said. They ran the next stretch. The air grew warmer as energy conduits pulsed with power. When they finally reached the lift chamber, Arathia pressed her hand to the access panel. The door slid open. But inside the chamber, the lift platform sat dead and dark. Arathia's heart sank. "They disabled it." "Not fully," Ruiz said, crouching beside the controls. "Power is cut, but the system isn't destroyed. Give me a moment." Arathia watched as the humans worked. They moved with impressive coordination. Ruiz reconnected wires, while two others guarded the entrance, and Marcus studied the power grid. Humans worked with a kind of intensity she rarely saw among her own people. They didn't hesitate or doubt themselves. They simply acted. Marcus traced a glowing cable along the wall. Power lines were severed on purpose. The rebels knew this was an escape route. Ruiz adjusted a panel, Sparks flew. I can reconnect auxiliary power, but it won't last long. How long? Marcus asked. One ride, Ruiz said. Arathea stepped closer. Do it. A moment later, the lift hummed weakly back to life. The platform lit, with a pale blue glow. Everyone inside, Ruiz ordered. As they stepped onto the platform, a violent explosion burst behind them. The rebels had reached the chamber. Go! Marcus shouted. Ruiz hit the control. The lift doors closed just as stun blasts hit the outer wall. The platform began rising, shaking slightly. The soft hum of machinery filled the small chamber. Arathea let out a long breath. We are safe. Not yet, Marcus said grimly. The lift suddenly jolted and slowed. The lights flickered. Ruiz checked her tablet. We're losing power. Someone is interfering with the system. Arathea stepped forward and placed her hand on the control panel. She didn't have technical skill, but she knew the patterns of palace systems. Route the energy flow through the secondary channel. It bypasses the damaged grid. Ruiz blinked in surprise. You know palace engineering? Arathea nodded softly. I studied it. People assumed I did nothing with my time, but I learned many things on my own. Ruiz redirected the power. The lift surged again, stabilizing. Marcus smiled. You just saved us. Her markings warmed. It was only practical knowledge. No. Marcus said gently. It was courage. She looked away, cheeks warming. You say that word too easily. Only when it's true. Before she could respond, the lift reached the top. The doors opened with a soft hiss. But instead of guards or allies, they were greeted by smoke and flashing alarms. Arathea's eyes widened. The central command floor was in chaos. Rebels had forced their way through part of the interior wall. The Emperor's guards were fighting hard, but the enemy numbers were larger than expected. Ruiz stepped forward. Stay behind us. Arathea shook her head. No. My presence may give the guards direction. They will fight harder if they see I am safe. Marcus hesitated. Princess. She met his eyes. I cannot hide. He nodded slowly. Then, we stay with you. One in time. 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 They stepped out into the smoky hall. Blaster fire echoed through the air. Guards noticed Arathea immediately. Protect the princess, one shouted. Form a defensive line. Their energy renewed. They pushed the rebels back with sharp coordination. Marcus and the humans kept close to Arathea, shielding her whenever a stray shot came near. She felt a strange warmth watching them, humans fighting for her, without hesitation. Without question. When a rebel tried to flank them, Marcus reacted instantly. He grabbed a fallen guard's deflector shield and stepped in front of Arathea, blocking the attack. The force of the strike pushed him back, but he held firm. Arathea gasped. Marcus! I'm fine, he grunted, steadying himself. Her markings flared bright with fear and relief. The rebel line finally broke. The remaining attackers fled as the palace guard advanced in tight formation. Within minutes, the hall was secured. Arathea saw her father, the Emperor, approaching with guarded eyes. His gaze scanned her glow, then moved to Marcus standing protectively beside her. You are unharmed, he said, relief hidden under his stern tone. I am, Arathea replied softly. Because the humans protected me. The Emperor looked at Marcus. Human? I owe you thanks. Marcus bowed slightly. We only did what was right. Arathea felt something warm bloom inside her chest. Her markings glowed softly, but steadily brighter than she had ever seen them. Her father noticed. His expression shifted with surprise. But Arathea didn't look at him. She looked at Marcus, who watched her with gentle eyes. not surprised by her glow, not confused, not uncomfortable. For the first time in her life, someone's presence made her light stronger. And in the quiet after the battle, she suddenly understood something. She was no longer dim, not in Marcus's eyes, not in her own. And maybe she never had been. The palace was quieter the next morning, but the air still carried traces of the chaos from the night before. Guards moved through the halls with tired but focused steps. Broken panels and scorched floors were already being repaired by palace engineers. The rebellion had failed, yet its shadow lingered. Princess Arathia walked slowly toward the medical wing, her markings glowing in a soft, steady rhythm. She tried to keep her expression calm, but her heart was racing. Marcus had taken a hit protecting her during the final confrontation, and she had not stopped worrying since. As she reached the entrance, 2 guards bowed and stepped aside. "The humans are inside," one said. "The specialist is stable." Arathia thanked them and entered the room. The soft glow of healing lamps filled the space. Marcus lay inside a transparent recovery pod, surrounded by humming medical devices. His eyes were closed, but his breathing looked steady. Arathia approached quietly, her steps light. She placed a hand on the glass, feeling a strange sting of fear as she looked at him. She had not realized how deeply she cared until she saw him fall. The memory of that moment still made her chest tighten. Commander Ruiz stood nearby, checking the readings on a tablet. She turned when she saw Arathia. "Good morning, Princess. Is he truly safe?" Arathia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ruiz softened her tone. "Yes, the injury wasn't deep. He'll wake soon." Arathia let out a slow breath. Her markings warmed with relief. Ruiz watched them pulse gently. "You care about him," Ruiz said quietly. Arathia looked at her in surprise. "I do not know what to call this feeling." Ruiz smiled faintly. "Sometimes caring doesn't need a name." Arathia lowered her gaze. "Humans are different. They express emotions freely. I am still learning how." Ruiz rested a hand on her shoulder, gentle but steady. "You're doing fine." When Ruiz stepped out to give them privacy, Arathia pulled a chair closer to the pod and sat beside Marcus, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. She folded her hands and spoke softly, unsure if he could hear her. "You said I had courage," she whispered. "But I only followed my heart without thinking. If courage means acting despite fear, then perhaps you are the one who has it." Her markings flickered with emotion. She realized she was no longer ashamed of them. For the first time, she wanted them to shine. "I do not want to return to being invisible," she said quietly. "I want to be seen. And you were the first person who truly saw me." She fell silent, suddenly embarrassed. But the quiet didn't last long. The recovery pod blinked softly, and Marcus's fingers twitched. Arathia stood instantly. "Marcus," she whispered. His eyes opened slowly. He blinked at the bright lights, then turned his head toward her. When he saw her, he smiled, tired, but genuine. "Princess." His voice was rough. "You're safe." Arathia pressed a hand to her chest. "You are the one who was hurt." "Just a scratch," he said, though his voice still held weakness. "You protect others without thinking," she said softly, "even when it puts you in danger." Marcus's smile widened a little. "Humans do strange things when we care." Her markings glowed instantly, gently bright. She didn't look away this time. "You cared," she said quietly. "Of course I cared," Marcus replied. "I care now." Her breath caught. "Why?" He blinked at her, surprised by the question. "Because you're kind. Because you're wise. Because you're brave, even when you think you're not. And because you're—" He paused, searching for the right word. "You." Her eyes softened. "You see worth in me that I never saw in myself." Marcus reached toward the glass, touching it from the inside. Arathia placed her hand over his, the thin barrier separating them but not blocking the warmth she felt. "You always had worth," he said. "You just needed someone to remind you." Arathia felt her heartbeat steady, strong, and new. "Your words changed me. And you changed me," Marcus said. They stayed like that for a long moment, their hands against the glass, their eyes locked. Arathia's markings glowed with a calm, warm light, steady and bright, not flickering with fear or doubt. A gentle knock broke the silence. The Emperor entered, his expression serious but softer than usual. He looked at Arathia, then at Marcus, then back at the glowing patterns on his daughter's skin. "They have never shone like this," he said quietly. Arathia lifted her chin. "Because I am no longer afraid." The Emperor studied her for several moments. "You have changed." "I have grown," she corrected, "and I wish to continue growing." He exhaled slowly, then nodded. "The Empire will listen to you. Your voice will matter from now on." Arathia's eyes widened slightly. She had never expected to hear such words. She bowed her head. "Thank you, Father." The Emperor turned to Marcus. "Human. You protected my daughter and helped save this palace. The Empire is in your debt." Marcus tried to sit up, but Arathia gently stopped him. "Rest. You are still healing." He smiled. "Yes, Princess." The Emperor left soon after, leaving the two of them in quiet peace. Arathia sat again, closer this time. "You should return to your home world once you recover," she said softly, though the thought pained her. Marcus looked at her with gentle confusion. "Do you want me to leave?" "I want you safe," she said. "But I will miss you." Marcus chuckled softly. "Then I'll stay. For as long as I'm allowed." Her heart lifted. "You would?" In a heartbeat. Her markings flooded with warm light, brighter than ever. "We can learn together," he replied. She smiled, small, shy, but real. It was the first time in her life she smiled without hiding it. The room felt warm, peaceful. The chaos of the past days faded into the background, replaced by something gentle and hopeful. Arathia leaned close to the pod. "You called me lovely," she whispered. "And you meant it." Marcus nodded. Her markings glowed in a steady golden pulse. For the first time, she believed the word. She believed him. And she believed in herself. The dim princess was dim no longer. And her story with the human who saw her light was only just beginning.